There's a certain kind of person who never really stopped looking back. You'll recognize them if you pay attention. They're the ones who slow down just a little when a specific car passes by. Not every car, just that one. The shape, the sound, the feeling it carries. Something in them shifts, almost involuntarily. Most people grow out of things like that. They trade fascination for practicality, dreams for decisions, posters for paychecks. But this person doesn't even years later. After responsibilities, after setbacks, after life has done what it always does, they're still chasing that same car they once saw as a kid. And on the surface, it looks simple. They just want the car. But there's something more going on here, because this isn't really about a machine made of metal and glass. It's about something that formed long before they even understood what they were feeling. Go back for a moment. A child sees a car for the first time, not as an object, but as an experience. Maybe it was in a movie. Maybe it drove past them on the street. Maybe someone they admired owned it. But what they felt wasn't technical appreciation. It was emotion, a sense of possibility, freedom, power, identity. At that age, the brain doesn't separate things the way adults do. It doesn't say, "This is a product." It says, "This is what life could feel like." And that feeling gets stored. Not as a memory of the car, but as a memory of who they were in that moment. Now consider what happens over time. Life starts layering expectations. You're told what matters, what's realistic, what's worth pursuing. Slowly, without noticing, most people adjust their desires to fit the world they live in. They learn to want what makes sense. They optimize. They compromise. And eventually, they forget what it felt like to want something without conditions. But not everyone forgets. Some people carry that original feeling forward, quietly, almost stubbornly. They don't always talk about it. They might even laugh it off when it comes up. But it stays there, in the background, like an unfinished sentence. And that's where it gets interesting. Because the pursuit of a childhood dream car isn't driven by logic. It's driven by identity continuity, the need to stay connected to a version of yourself that felt real before the world started editing you. When they think about that car, they're not just thinking about owning it. They're thinking about reclaiming something, a version of themselves that wasn't filtered through expectations, a version that chose based on feeling, not permission. And in a strange way, that makes the car less of a goal and more of a symbol. But here's the part most people don't notice. This pursuit often intensifies when life feels misaligned. When someone drifts too far from who they thought they would become, the mind starts looking for anchors. Things that feel authentic, unchanged, familiar. And childhood dreams are perfect for that. They haven't been negotiated with. They haven't been diluted. They represent a kind of psychological true north. So chasing that car becomes a way of correcting course. Not outwardly, but internally. It's a quiet attempt to say, "I'm still that person. I didn't lose that part of me." Now think about how this shows up in behavior. You'll see people researching the same car for years. Watching videos, saving images, knowing every detail, every variation, every sound. To an outsider, it looks excessive. But to them, it feels grounding. Because every interaction with that car reinforces a sense of identity that the rest of life doesn't always provide. And this is where the emotional layer deepens. Because sometimes the dream isn't even fully about owning the car. It's about proving something, not to others, but to themselves, that they didn't settle completely. That somewhere along the way, they still honored at least one thing that once mattered to them deeply, that they were capable of closing a loop that most people leave open. But there's a subtle tension here, because the closer they get to achieving it, the more complicated it becomes. You would think finally getting the car would resolve everything. But often, it doesn't. Because the original feeling wasn't just about possession, it was about anticipation, imagination, becoming. And when the dream becomes real, it changes form. It becomes quieter, less electric. Almost like the mind has to find a new way to relate to it. This is why some people, after finally getting their dream car, feel a strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. Not because it wasn't worth it, but because the meaning they attached to it was never fully about the object itself. It was about the journey toward it, the identity they built around chasing it, the version of themselves that existed in the almost there state. But there's another side to this. For some, the car becomes exactly what they hoped. Not because it fulfills every expectation, but because it serves as a physical reminder of something rare: follow through. In a world where most desires get replaced or abandoned, they stayed with one. They didn't let it fade. They didn't let practicality erase it. And that creates a kind of internal alignment that's hard to explain. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it's stable. Now step back and look at the bigger picture. What does it really mean to chase a childhood dream like this? It means resisting a certain kind of psychological drift, the slow movement away from your original self. It means valuing continuity over convenience, meaning over efficiency, and maybe even emotion over logic, at least in one small corner of life. Because not everything we pursue needs to be optimized. Some things exist simply because they remind us who we were before we learned how to be someone else. And maybe that's why this behavior stands out. Not because it's rare to want something from childhood, but because it's rare to keep wanting it without letting the world talk you out of it. Most people adapt. They adjust their desires until they fit their circumstances so well that they forget they ever wanted anything different. But this person doesn't fully adapt. They carry a piece of their past forward unchanged, and in doing so, they create a quiet tension between who they are and who they once imagined becoming. That tension is what keeps the dream alive. And maybe, in a way, that's the real point. Not the car, not the ownership, but the refusal to completely disconnect from a version of yourself that once felt honest. Because if you look closely, everyone has something like this. Something small, maybe even irrational, that they once wanted for no reason other than how it made them feel. And over time, most people let it go, not because it stopped mattering, but because something else started mattering more. Practicality, responsibility, perception. But every now and then, you come across someone who didn't let go. They kept the thread, they followed it, even when it didn't make sense. And whether they reach it or not, there's something different about them, something more consistent. So the question isn't really about cars. It's about that version of you that existed before everything became calculated. The one that chose based on instinct, not outcome. The one that saw something and felt something without needing to justify it. And maybe the real question is this: what did that version of you want that you quietly decided to forget?